Before Mike Hosking comes Rachel Smalley, KPMG Early Edition, with KPMG helping fuel New Zealand's prosperity on NewstalkZB.
It's 5:12. The Labour leader says the government should rather pass the plain packaging tobacco bill without delay, instead of waiting for the outcome of the legal challenge to plain packaging in Australia. David Cunliffe also says the government shouldn't kowtow to big tobacco interests. The Labour leader is with me now. Good morning, Mr Cunliffe. The government hasn't said per se that it won't pass the bill. It just says we should wait to see what legal precedent is set in Australia first. That's the smart thing to do, surely.
Not necessarily, no. It gives the litigants more leverage in the Australian market, and to signal to them that our regulatory process is going to be pushed around by their willingness to litigate, I think sends a very dangerous precedent indeed.
So what would you do?
In fact, incentivise more litigation in this and other fields.
What would you do then?
I think the bill should proceed forthwith. I think the government should be clear that this is a public health issue on which it has every right and obligation to legislate on the public's behalf. Cigarettes kill people. We can limit the number of deaths, and it's as simple as that.
I think that is the general opinion, though, has a lot of support from within Parliament. Why do you think or the Prime Minister in particular, the government is kowtowing to big tobacco interests? Where's the evidence that that's happening?
Simply your previous statement that you are reporting that the Prime Minister has said that he is not willing to proceed at the present time because he's awaiting the outcome of the Australian litigation.
But that's with the WTO, I think, the World Trade Organisation, isn't it?
Yes, I understand that to be the case.
So that's not necessarily big tobacco that he's kowtowing to, if you like. He's just waiting.
Are you talking about the TPPA discussions?
No, I'm talking about the legal challenge in Australia, which is the World Trade Organisation that has gone...
It's under the WTO framework, but it's using, as I understand it, Australian jurisdiction.
All right. Do you still think, though, that he's kowtowing to big tobacco interests?
If he is changing the timetable of the Sovereign Parliament of New Zealand because of a legal process instigated by business interests in a foreign jurisdiction, then I think he is unfortunately creating an incentive for other people to litigate, knowing that the New Zealand government will thus change its mind or its timetable to accommodate that risk. Okay. It's not a good incentive to set. It provides all the wrong incentives.
I want to touch on the issue of passports as well. I think Labour introduced why will you now reverse that back to a 10-year passport if you get in government?
I'm sure simply the technology has changed. The introduction of biometric facial recognition technology, that's the stuff you go through the airport. It measures how far apart your eyes are, how long your nose is, and how good your teeth are, that sort of stuff. And it's pretty much unique to the individual, which means it's much, much harder to create passport fraud.
That said, though, 10 years technology
need to be limited to 5 years.
Technology does change a lot, though, doesn't it? In 10 years, I'm pretty sure there'll be fraudsters working on that right now to try and challenge that new technology.
There is no evidence to suggest that the risk is any greater on a 10-year passport than a 5. And let's not forget that for the average Kiwi, a passport is a very expensive item to purchase. And
$140 though, $140 over 5 years. Some would argue that if you can't afford that, then you probably shouldn't be booking that overseas trip as well.
Well, you can make that argument, that's quite right. But look, is the cost necessary? That's the question. And my advice is that technology has moved on, that a 10-year passport is equally safe, and that there's no need to limit it now to 5 years. And there's wide public support for this move.
Now, I just want to touch on Kim.com. Have you met with Kim.com?
I've met him twice in my life, only briefly at a public event, both times. One was a meeting in the Mount Albert War Memorial Hall, a public meeting against the GCSB bill. The second was a public rally in Queen Street where I bumped into him at the rally.
Right.
We didn't have time on either occasion for a substantive conversation.
Have any of your MPs met with him?
Well, look, I frankly don't know who's met with him and who hasn't.
Do you know who may have met with him recently?
No, I'm not briefed on who's met with him recently or not.
Do you want to know who may have been meeting with him, given what's out there at the moment? Given that we know Winston Peters has been meeting with him, etc.
I certainly have not provided anybody with any authority to do any deals with him, if that's what you're implying.
No,
Labour is not doing any deals with Mr. We are respecting the judicial process, which is currently before the courts.
Will you meet with him in future? Do you plan to, given the fact that you know, he could be part of a coalition. Are you prepared to meet with him?
Look, I have no plans to meet with him, but I wouldn't rule it out either. Let's just see how the future unfolds.
All right, David Cunliffe, thank you for your time this morning.
KPMG Early Edition.
Now, sometimes I think we worry about things that we don't really need to worry about, and I'll give you an example. It's this 5-year passport issue. The Kiwi living in Australia, Carl Lockwood, he's the head of the group that's lobbying for the return of the 10-year passport. And why? Well, he says it's a bit expensive compared to the rest of the world. Well, I just don't accept that. It's $140. If you can't afford that, as I mentioned in my interview with Cunliffe, well, you might want to think twice about booking that week on the Gold Coast. And secondly, the group says it's an inconvenience. Well, is it? I filed my passport application online and it was an absolute breeze. 2 days after I sent it, just 2 days, the new passport was posted back to me. I tell you, the Department of Internal Affairs couldn't have been more efficient if it tried. And it's not often you can say that about a government department. But look, here's the real issue. Technology moves quickly. It morphs, it changes. And it does so at the drop of a hat. And right now, as sure as eggs, there will be fraudsters working on ways to beat the system, working on ways to fool the biometric technology that our new passports carry. It may seem impossible now, but we know that could all change in a heartbeat. So the best option? Well, the system's not broken, so why fix it? The 5-year passport's working. Let's just leave it at that.